I want to welcome you all to the Woodrow Wilson Center. My name's Jeff DeBelko, and I'm very fortunate to direct our Environmental Change and Security Program here at the Woodrow Wilson Center. It's a real thrill to be able to do things like this, which is host today's session, Data in Motion, 25 Years of Demographic and Health Surveys, with someone I think we can all agree is truly providing us a visionary tool for doing what we're supposed to do here at the Wilson Center, which is bridge the worlds of research and policy. So Hans Rosling has done that with a technology and then a set of analysis that comes behind that in a way that has really enriched and made much easier the effort that many of you here in the audience work on day to day, which is really trying to have a scientific understanding of a range of health issues and put that into practice in a policy context. And so it is really a thrill that he has joined us here today. I'm going to be very brief because we have a number of folks who would like to participate and share their insights and put this in context. And so in just one moment, I'll introduce Scott Radloff, who is the director of USAID's Office of Population and Reproductive Health, to do that. Just a word about where you're sitting before Scott comes up and gets us started. The Woodrow Wilson Center is actually the formal memorial to Wilson, so really trying to personify his life as both a scholar and politician. So as I said up front, this is really what we're trying to do, bring these two worlds together. The Environmental Change and Security Program, we're a 15-year-old program trying to understand how population health, environment, development is integrally connected with our broader foreign and security policy context as well. And so the tools that we'll talk about today are critical for that. We hope you will continue to come to these meetings. I see many friends in the audience, and find us online. And we are thankful in today's occasion, as we are on so many occasions, that USAID's Office of Population and Reproductive Health have been so supportive. I should also say, and you'll hear from Martin Vess in just a moment, Macro International has joined us in allowing us to continue our conversation after the formal part of the program today, and obviously so critical on DHS, but most importantly here in some of these sessions allow us to continue to talk in a reception right afterwards. So we thank them very much for this whole collaboration for both the formal part and the continued conversation. So I think I'll turn the floor right over to Scott and Scott Radloff, who, as you all know, is the Director of Office of Population and Reproductive Health, someone who is obviously critical and key to the DHS surveys as a user himself. And so, Scott, I'll turn the floor over to you.
Thank you. I'm going to keep my remarks short because I want to save time for our main event, Hans Rosling. I'd like to welcome everyone to one of the main events that we have this year, commemorating the 25th anniversary of the Demographic and Health Surveys program. We call this the Silver Jubilee of what we considered a gold standard. The DHS is a flagship project with the Bureau for Global Health. It provides reliable, nationally representative, and cross-nationally comparable information for monitoring, tracking, and evaluating health status, health behavior, and health trends. In the 25 years of DHS, we have surveyed over 70 countries, and many of these countries have had multiple surveys, as many as 6, at least according to my count. One of the unique features of DHS is that the data collected are made available to researchers and analysts without charge. Thus, it is widely utilized. For example, the DHS website just this past year had 1.3 million visits, and over 87,000 data sets were downloaded. DHS was initially a USAID only sponsored program. Over the years, support from non-USAID sources has grown from an average of about $26,000 in its first 5 years per year to an average of $18 million per year over the last 5 years. For that reason, we acknowledge the support of our partners, including UNICEF, UNFPA, WHO, World Bank, DFID, JICA, EU, not to mention host country governments, Gates Foundations, other foundations, probably others I'm not mentioning here. The DHS data are critical for our work in global health. They provide valuable information for guiding our health assistance programs. They allow us to track indicators of health status and behaviors over time. They allow us to evaluate the underlying factors and interventions that affect health status. And they tell us the story of the impact of health interventions to our policy leaders, both in our own country and the countries we assist. And it's this last critical function of DHS data that gathers us here today. Many researchers and analysts have made good use of the DHS data, but perhaps none have made the data come alive as our speaker today. We are very pleased that Hans Rosling has agreed to join us today to help celebrate 25 years of DHS and to help us translate the information collected through DHS in a way that we can better understand demographic trends and their implications for development. I would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the USAID technical managers of DHS who have shaped its design and guided its implementation. While a variety of staff have participated in the management of DHS, I'd like to single out 3 people for special mention. Dick Cornelius, I'm not sure if he's here with us today, but I know Krista Stewart and Jacob Adetunji are both here, and we'd like to acknowledge their work on DHS over the years. And now I'd like to turn the microphone over to Martin Vasson, who was for 20 years the director of the DHS project. Martin has spent almost his entire career on the DHS and its predecessor project, the World Fertility Survey. I should recognize also that the very first director of DHS was Bob Lapham, and its current director is Ann Way, and Ann Way is here with us today. Martin is a veteran survey manager and has guided this reputable international survey program from its infancy through its difficult teen years and on to maturity. So without further ado, Martin Vasson.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really only going to talk a little bit about the history of the DHS. And in the history is basically the commitment of USAID to the development of data that will help them monitor and evaluate programs. And the commitment has been really very deep. USAID started in 1972 with the establishment of the World Fertility Survey. At that time, together with UNFPA, the Dutch government, the English government, and some maybe $1 million from the government of Japan. That program ran for like 12 years and did surveys in 41 countries. Even at that time, USAID already had the foresight to say that these data should all be freely available. So the first thing we had was an archive. People could use the data, request copies of the data, and do any analysis they wanted. In 1976, I think, Anne, was the time that USAID also developed the contraceptive prevalence surveys that were operated at the time by Westinghouse Systems. They operated also till 1984, did surveys in about 36 countries, mostly geared towards family planning, while the DHS may be a bit more in other areas. The WFS was in other areas as well. So then in 1984, USAID really decided to bring these programs together under what was called the Demographic and Health Surveys program. And needless to say, this has been an extremely successful program in our views, given the number of countries that participate, the regularity with which people in the country want to have access to these data, and the major use that these data have gotten out there in the world. And so Blavel and Hans will highlight this. We are kind of undersold in the sense that we often disappear in UN reports or World Bank reports, and the actual source of the data may be nowhere, but I'll leave that to you, Hans. You can do that like nobody else can. My task here basically is briefly to introduce a video that are some testimonials of people out there that have used DHS data, know the DHS. It's brief, but we wanted to bring to you a few people from across the world that could give their own view on the DHS. So please watch with me this new video. Thank you.
In 1984, USAID started the Demographic and Health Surveys project. In 1985, data collection began in El Salvador. Throughout the years, more countries were surveyed, different survey types were developed, new technologies used, and more topics covered. In 2009, 25 years, 240 surveys, and 85 countries later, we celebrate the use of DHS data around the world. Data that have supported informed decisions and led to better population and health policies and programs. Data that have helped improve lives.
It's the most powerful development tool available for countries of the third world.
La encuesta es una mina de datos que debe ser explotada por académicos, por instituciones, por tomadores de decisiones.
The letters DHS are actually like a word. People just say the DHS and they know instantly what it is. There's instant recognition.
The National Demographic Survey has been a pressure probe for researchers.
The DHS has helped catapult the world into the modern era of evidence-based policy.
I've seen it make a difference, especially when one is developing programs for interventions. You'll be able to know the gaps and where to target your programs.
DHS's initial mission was to assess change and progress in fertility, family planning, and maternal and child health.
For a story in vaccination, I suddenly had data, the trend data that showed that actually the vaccination rates were improving, confirmation that a lot of the programs in the field were working. That, to me, was an incredible public service.
Es una encuesta que para el país tiene la gran importancia de ser la fuente de información fundamental para hacer seguimiento a todos los indicadores de salud sexual y reproductiva.
The concept of unmet need for family planning matured and evolved in the hands of the DHS. The DHS is the gold standard in monitoring unmet need for family planning.
In recent years, DHS has responded to emerging global needs, collecting data on gender, domestic violence, and malaria.
The DHS, to my knowledge, is the most extensive source of nationally representative population-based data that includes some of the most reputable measures of domestic violence.
DHS information about FGC allowed me to include in my reports more accurate data about what happens in African countries.
DHS surveys provide information on the types of drugs that are used in the treatment of malaria in children. We use this information to convince governments to change their drug policies.
Countries are actually able as part of the DHS to look at parasite prevalence. We're in the process now of working with the government on a national campaign to deliver insecticide-treated nets. And if you look at that map, it's very clear, if you want to have an impact on the burden of malaria, where you should start.
DHS estimates of national HIV prevalence have changed the way the world understands the AIDS epidemic.
The addition in 2001 of HIV testing to these surveys was an important contribution, the results of which have vastly improved the accuracy of national HIV prevalence estimates.
It has given the opportunity to also revise downwards the global level of the epidemic, and this was mostly based on the quality of the information collected through the demographic and health surveys.
It has made a difference, particularly that we have now done the HIV testing for the second time. It will give us an indication on where more programs have to be done at a more intense level, looking at the results that we have gotten from the surveys.
We need to show results, and the surveys help us measure them. They are vital to reach the goal of universal access to HIV prevention, treatment, care, and support.
DHS represents an international standard for quality control and data collection. And after data collection, DHS ensures that users have free access to the data, as well as the basic survey tools.
The DHS has really, for me personally, but I also think for the field of global health, transformed the whole arena by first establishing that data should be in the public domain,
It imposed a kind of standard questionnaire. It increased comparability in the analysis, so that what you ask in Sri Lanka, you're asking the same set of questions in Niger.
The DHS data sets are in fact extremely user-friendly and ready to use.
I'm advising people, for example, people in Namibia to use it, and it's also a teaching aid on its own.
With each survey, DHS strives to build the capacity of the host country, leaving behind not only statistics and reports, but a greater ability to collect and use data.
Doing the DHS survey in Turkey helped us to improve the quality of the data that we are collecting and have a better understanding and better implementation of the international standards in collecting data.
They are creating a lot of capacity building within the developing countries. Like myself, I grew with the DHS. It's through the capacity that I got from the macro that I'm here as the Director General of the NBS.
The ultimate goal of the DHS project is to support the use of data to inform policies and programs.
Through DHS, in Bangladesh, we found that there was extremely high inequity in using all types of maternal health services. So now, interventions are designed to address the need of the poor.
We have what we call the national development plans in the country. There, we use the DHS heavily in terms of informing the policies on health. Without the DHS, we would have serious gaps.
When you see even mayors and governors, local decision makers, NGOs, international community, citing the demographic health survey as the most reliable data that you can get.
Recently, using the maternal health data of DHS, we have planned an intervention for prevention of postpartum hemorrhage, and which I believe would make a lot of difference in maternal mortality.
It's given us tools and the means to have evidence-based decision making.
For 25 years, DHS data have been an invaluable resource for policymakers, program managers, students, researchers, and international organizations.
Clearly, the countries want these surveys. The countries value the data. They keep coming back and requesting new surveys.
I'd like to thank all the partners who are involved in DHS. It is just a sort of compass for us, where to go and where do we stand.
This entire effort is a triumph of initiative and vision on the part of USAID. It's a triumph of partnership, and really it's a triumph of quality information that feeds decision making around the world.
Thank you, USAID, and the dozens of other funders who have supported surveys throughout the world. We are grateful to the thousands of people who have worked to collect data, and to the women and men interviewed who have generously given their time. The results of these efforts will continue to be used to improve our world.
Good afternoon. My name is Jacob Adetunji. I work at USAID as the lead technical manager for the Demographic and Health Service project. It is my pleasure to introduce the guest speaker for today, Professor Hans Rosling. Professor Hans Rosling comes to us from the Karolinska Institute of the Medical University of Stockholm in Sweden, where he is Professor of Global Health. He is the director and co-founder of the Gapminder Foundation in Sweden, a foundation which aims to promote a facts-based worldview by presenting data to audiences through moving, interactive, understandable, and enjoyable graphics. He developed the Tenderizer software to do just exactly that. That software has been a huge success, so much so that Google acquired it in 2007. I don't want to say it's a rich man. Today, it will be showing us a few outputs from that software. As a young medical doctor, Professor Hans Rosling studied in India and worked in Mozambique. While in Mozambique, he discovered Konzo, a previously unrecognized paralytic disease induced by hunger and malnutrition. He is a member of the international group of the Swedish Academy of Science and also a member of Global Agenda Network of the World Economic Forum in Switzerland. He has been an advisor to WHO and to UNICEF. I don't have to tell you that Professor Rosling is a dynamic speaker. He is an extraordinary data user. If you have not visited his Gapminder.com website, please check it out. He literally makes data come alive. He synthesizes hundreds of data points and uses them to tell stories that are hidden from common or ordinary eyes. Well, Professor Rosling is a lover of good data, particularly those that come from the Demographic and Health Service. To show you how much he appreciates the DHS data, when we approached him to make a presentation like this today, he not only accepted our invitation, he accepted and did so at no cost to USAID or to the DHS project. We are not paying his airfare. His hotel cost is at no cost. I mean, it's not our burden. And he's receiving no honorarium for this presentation today. It is his own personal way of saying thank you to USAID and to American taxpayers for the gift of DHS as a public good to the entire world. Now, please join me in giving a warm Washington welcome to a consummate data ambassador of the DHS, Professor Hans Rosling.
I knew issues of conflict of interest would be important, and I so understand from the laughers here. We created a foundation that was non-profit in Sweden because we knew that we had to be that for strategical purposes, not ideological purposes. And it's so difficult to bridge what is paid by government money to get it through technologies from private firms and out to the public. So these issues are important. And in fact, the payment from Google went to Gapminder Foundation. I didn't get the buck myself. And I now work at Gapminder Foundation at the same salary as I would have had at the university, and all lecture fees feed our free webpage. It is indeed very important this when we deal with data. Credibility comes even before methods of it. But all these nights, I could also say that we are .org. We are .org. But this doesn't help, because nothing of my career in the last 10 years would have been possible without DHS. So anyway, I try to handle it. I'm in deep, I don't know how, with language I should use here, but I'm in deep problem, because I'm in conflict of interest, because without DHS I wouldn't be standing here, Larry Page would never have, from Google, would never have jumped the stage, and I asked about the Trendalizer software. By the way, he was the only one who didn't give the credit to me for the software. He looked at me like this, and they said, "Who wrote the code?" He said. And I admitted that this was all about water skiing after my son and his wife, who sat in the closet and wrote code for 7 years, And now they are product manager at Google. So I have a young American grandchild also due to DHS data. So I have a lot. It's very difficult for you, actually. You can't get the speaker here who is not in conflict of interest. But on the other hand, it's very easy what I have to do. I had to speak for 25 years. So what do? You take a Churchill citation and you modify it. Rarely did so many owe so much to so few. That's the easy one. Now the difficult is what I added myself without knowing it. This is, as I can catch it, the most difficult challenge for you at DHS, because it's such a wide use out in the world by so many who doesn't have the slightest idea that this data they use for making decisions or making choices, you know, or acting or deciding not to act, was collected by professional scholars in the different countries together with a professional specialist from DHS and generously funded by the North American taxpayers. I have the habit of thanking the taxpayers. And then also by the amazing steadiness of USAID's manager throughout different administration to stay on track. That's what surprised us most from outside. We have so much fashion in aid organizations. So much fashion in aid organizations. Last week, SIDA in Sweden said we no longer have a focus on child health per se. So we won't take any notice of pneumonia or child survival. You know. And this week they arranged a seminar which is about human rights for children in climate change. It's just fashion, you know, but you have kept this steadiness. So this is what is so important, you know, in what you are doing. And what I've learned today when I visited DHS is that this is public-private partnership at its best. This is what you have managed to do here. You know, it's a government who have taken bids and the company who have adapted to what was needed and managed to gather an amazing collection of professionals who have done this year after year. But still, it's a fragile construction. It's a real fragile construction. And that's why this is my real task, is to convey to the world, not to you, but to the world, that why do we have this data? And as we saw from the film, the decision makers in the countries, they know it. And what is especially interesting also, because I've been doing epidemiological service in low-income countries in Africa over the last 20 years, and I've noted that so many scholars and colleagues, they say DHS is the best. That's better than PhDs, because it's real life survey. It is the real driving license for doing service. In an international collaboration, we do quality assurance. And also, they like the meritocracy that has been applied, that national directors are getting the task not only in their country or can make the career. I thought we had very, very nice comments here. So, do you provide data for decisions? It's absolutely hopeless to provide the data for the decision to continue with DHS. I just heard you had 1.2 million visitors to your webpage. That's nothing. I have more with 8 employees. But 90% of them, of those visits, are due to DHS. So I contribute 1.5 million to you for next time you call. And we know, although we had Google Analytics, we have all these search tools, we cannot measure all the way where it filters away. This program has to be continually supported based on wisdom. And it's tricky, sort of, you know, when the program is there to provide numbers. And yes, you must understand the whole structure and the architecture for what you can do when this program is. So with our moving bubbles, now I shouldn't show this, this is our web page. I should go here, you know, and instead show you what you can show about MDGs. With our moving bubbles, we have had 2 major hit groups. It's actually children below 15 and heads of state, because they have an attention span of 3 seconds. And they are fed up with people telling them how things are. They want to see for themselves. And here we can show them that in 1959, when all this aid was started, we had 100 million children born in the world, and about 150 per 1,000 died. That is based on census estimate at that time. So you know the uncertainty rate is fairly big, and the estimated income in the world was like this. But the world was very uneven. Look, when I split it into country bubbles, you see some countries up almost 500 per 1,000 in death rates. Some countries almost up to 20,000 there. This is United States of America. Size is number of birth. And some countries only with some few $100s. It's 100-fold difference there, 100-fold difference. That's our world. That's the mankind which we have to grasp. And in order to see the change, I have to zoom it in. And we were used to call those developing countries and those brown ones industrialized countries. And this is what happened. We saw the economy growing. We saw the child mortality coming down. And now we are having DHS data. Now it's much more better data, and they are moving. You can see more precisely. This is China. This is India. And you can see that the industrialized world is now composed with what was used to call developing countries. And if you turn around your computer, you will see on the bottom where they are made. That's the best economic survey. We are a fairly conventional Swedish family. We give each other too many presents. And over the last 25 years, actually, after everyone has shared their presents, I go around and turn around the boxes and see where they are made. And I've seen the economy moving to Asia, and to Latin America and to other places. Now, how can we understand this? How can we make this understandable for more? I think the MDG is a catastrophe didactically. Reduce child mortality with 2/3 in 25 years. I mean, it's hopeless to understand what that means. And everyone is just polite to United Nations and continue. I like this new average annual rate of reduction. It's very good. We measure reduction of child mortality as we measure growth of the economy in % per year. And then we can really take up. And I think the period of Human Development Index is over. That was in the time of Excel. We put a lot of things together, and then we got an index. Now we need to be able to display clean indicators. And you produce clean indicators in time series. So 4.3%. Have anyone managed to do that rate? Well, I will start with my own country that has quite good credentials when it comes to lowering child mortality. I fly it 100 years back. In 1900, Sweden was up there. Sort of relatively wealthy and had a child mortality of 150 per 1,000, under 5 mortality rate, And that is actually the same as Bangladesh had 1990, the year when we started to measure Millennium Development Goal. But Bangladesh was distinctly poorer, and this is purchasing power dollar adjusted for inflation, the best the economists can deliver for us. So Sweden was much richer there, and now we're going to run a chicken race. We are going to give it 16 years to 2006, and Sweden from 1900 to 1960. 16, ready, steady, go. Here we go. You can see the economy is growing in Bangladesh, and they're steady going down. Sweden go a little like this, haphazardly like this, and Bangladesh goes down 4.7%. They beat Sweden. Next race is between Sweden and Egypt. 1990, Egypt had the same child mortality as Sweden had 1916, 91. And here we go. You can see Egypt, they get safe water in the Nile Delta, get malaria away, primary health care, and even subsidized bread, 5.5%. Absolutely amazing data. One of the most unknown figure in global health is the amazing improvement of child health in Egypt. And USAID can take part of the credit of that, actually. And this is not known. So Sweden, at this time, my students start to protest. They say, this is not fair. Sweden is running at a time when there were no vaccine, there were no penicillin. This is unfair. Yeah, but still, you run against Brazil here. 1932 Sweden, now there will be coming some antibiotics and some more to treat. Let's see whether Sweden can do it. And Brazil was quite wealthy. It was a country of inequity, but they're doing fine. Social investments, primary health care. They handle the main causes of death. 6.3%. It's absolutely amazing how well they've done. But the Swedish students protest. This is unfair. So I have to give them a real time. Sweden against Singapore, a marshland on the equator, the most tropical of all tropical countries. And I start the year I was born, 1948. Singapore was up there, recovering after a very, very terrible occupation during the Second World War, but still then ruled by the British afterwards, and then Sweden down here. And the students are very happy with this. This will be the Sweden must win. And Singapore, they can't grow their economy during colonial time, but with independence, they grow their economy. They invest in health. They get health service for all the people. They have education, and they get really rich. And we never thought this would happen, that they would bypass Sweden and they will win. And Sweden, look. Sweden, during the last 100 years, didn't achieve Millennium Development Goal rate. Remember this. We are putting goals for Tanzania, for Bangladesh, that never was achieved by any country in West Europe or North America. This speed of change didn't happen. And yet, when we look at it, all these green countries are on track or faster. And lots of these measurements are DHS measurements, which allow us to measure. And these countries, the yellow ones, they are like 3%, 2.5%, almost on track. The big one, India and China, is among them, you know. And the problem we are seeing is actually the red ones, which are mainly low-income countries. By the way, since 7 years back, we fail all students who use the term developing countries. We punish them and said, you never had the textbook of American history, which was 2 chapters, now and in the past. And in the past, they mixed Washington and Eisenhower. You have to keep Washington and Eisenhower apart. But when we say developing countries, we put countries together which are like United States during Washington and United States during Eisenhower. It's a remaining mindset of colonial thinking. It's actually politically can be justified. In trade negotiations, there can be some things justified. But I mean, the big change took place here during the last president, his last month, when G7 became G20. That was the end of it. That was the end of the concept developing countries. And I think George W. Bush will be remembered in the history book for that meeting. That is a really turning point, where finally, after colonial time, it was no longer we and them in the world. I actually classify United States and some other of the rich countries as the indebted nations today. Because this is a reality. DHS is financed by money borrowed from China today. So perhaps I misdirected my thanks. They should go to the Foreign Reserve in Beijing. But anyhow, this looks a little grim. And what says that countries here which are building their nations from a difficult past, like Congo and others, should be able to reach a rate of decline that Sweden never made it for? What says that the rate of reduction of child mortality should be the same through 3 centuries of development? It's a little too rough. But there's some good news. Look at Tanzania here. Using DHS data mainly, the publication in Lancet last year put an advanced analysis of your data and showed that indeed child mortality did not fall during 9 years. And then it's falling by 10% reduction. And you've seen these reductions, and many of us start to question what has happened with DHS. Are you missing out with quality now? Can this be possible, this fast fall in some countries? Malawi also have a fall like this. Is it a stigma among the women struck by HIV/AIDS now, and they don't communicate the deaths? But many things indicate that this is correct data. The mortality among the first 6 months did not fall. This is effects from 6 months and above, mainly. And it coincides more or less with a doubled AIDS budget, a very rational support for immunization, and the discovery of how to deliver and how to get bed nets used for malaria. And other things. I could add a lot of things. And this is very important to really be able to show this data. Easterly have to study a little more, you know. I think Bill Gates gave a very nice summary of him. He said he's lazy. You can't write a book about aid in lazy ways. You have to dig down into the data. You have to look. You can't make sweeping statements about developing countries over 4 decades. Of course, there's terrible mistakes made in many places. But we have to go more specifically into a country during a special period, during special investments, and look at it. And your data enable us to do that. Now, what can we learn more about data? Well, I gave you this graph. You have got this. And this is basically a new world map. Instead of north and south, healthy and sick, instead of east and west, rich and poor. These are the countries of the world. The size is population. Here, child mortality. We flipped it around. There's a problem with child mortality. Lay people don't like child mortality. They close, I don't want to hear about children dying. Life expectancy is much better. We try to convert it to child survival. Improvement of child survival is much better understood than decrease of child mortality. Too often we get stuck in the way what we learned in school and what we have learned in science, you know. Money is much more easy to understand. You get more dollar, you are richer. People understand that immediately. And it's very important also to show this is not now Washington and US, this is my great-great-grandma, 1830. She was born in Sweden when Sweden was like Sierra Leone. And my great-grandma, 1863, the only in the family who remained when all the others went to Minnesota. And my fourth cousin then became the Lutheran pastor in Portland after the Oregon track. Sweden was like Mozambique, and my grandma, when she was born, Sweden was like Ghana. You can see the difference within sub-Saharan African averages correspond to generations of development of Sweden. And this I know because when my mother, at my age of 4, my mother got tuberculosis, and I stayed with my grandma, and she told me this. So I have verbal description about the life conditions of my great-grandma and my great-great-grandma that my grandma met. And she describes homes as I find them in Sierra Leone, Mozambique, and Ghana. There were very good reasons to risk the trip across the Atlantic. There were very good reasons for that. Life was miserable in Sweden, really miserable. And this is what we then call grandma-verified statistics. The highest form of quality certification in statistics that we know. My mother was born when Sweden was like Egypt. I am in the family the Mexican. My daughter was born when Sweden was like Chile. And my granddaughter was born when Sweden was almost like Singapore. I think this is what we need. We need to show your data. Your data enable us to see the steadiness of development in countries. Some countries find oil and mineral, and they end up like there. Equatorial Guinea, the most unjust country in the world. The president family keeps most of the oil money. And some countries manage to be healthy like Vietnam, but very lately they start to have a decent economic system so that they can improve their wealth. And we can place countries in a good way like this. So how do we want the data? I have a very easy conceptual framework. The world is there, we gather data, and we have to give it back. Isn't it easy? This is what it's all about. But in reality, it becomes more complex. The world is down there. We get microdata up there. Microdata go down to research. Research try to affect policy and government, or they are in the commercial sector and they make the market work, or the data is calculated into indicators sent to media sent it down to civil society that should affect them. And then there's a little web page over there, you know, and the web page goes down to civil society and they try to ask, they send queries this way, and it's very difficult to make it work. That's more or less where we are today. What I suggest now is that we try to use the new technology for data. And I found a very good way of getting data. There's a little tube down there. It's called YouTube. And if we send down the data into YouTube there, I found it's amazingly successful to get it into the society. Who would ever believe that you could go to Google search and you could, what do people do? People tell me it's useless YouTube. It's just rubbish, filth, you know, and greed, you know. So people search for, what do they search? They search for sex, money, and perhaps a little health. And what do you go if you search for sex, money, and health? You get the Swedish public health professor on top of 31 million hits. That's something. Who would believe that this man looking like this, you know, here, would be on top on sex, money, and health? And it's a quite boring presentation of the economic growth, demographic and fertility change and health change in Sweden over 200 years. And it's very interesting. I just saw today Obama budget cuts funds for abstinence-only sex education. So I'm very frightened now because this news may climb to the top. It's so important. The world welcome it so much, you know. And you can really achieve amazing things here. But what is needed for this? Well, we have data in many formats. We praise DHS here, but we know that a number increases its value exponentially with comparability. Comparability over time, in income quintile, in ethnic groups, with economic data, with environmental data, you know, migration data. So we need unified format. We do not have a unified format for data. That's why the transaction cost is so enormously high. And that's why those who put data together in unified format charge for it. Have you given a license to the World Bank to sell the data you produce? Why don't you take them to court then? It's quite serious. World Development Indicators are selling your data. There are great statisticians doing that. Sheila Baidia and Eric Swanson are great professionals, and they're very nice persons also. That's why it's sort of painful to criticize the policy. But it's very strange that the good combinations of data we have are sold. World Bank and OECD have a worse data policy than the People's Republic of China. They have free download on their webpage. And this is very strange. It goes against what you have. Why do the DHS have this policy you have? Because in the Constitution of the United States, it says that data belongs to the people. And I'm a great admirer of that Constitution. That was actually to be able to do the first. You can imagine after that war of independence that people would be suspicious of someone coming and calculate. So the founding fathers put it into the Constitution. It was from the start. So today, United States is the best country to develop new models of data sharing, because all data is free. And we need that at international level also. And I think this is one area where you can go a little more boldly forward and push forward and ask. And the new president of the World Bank, he's quite used to that constitution. So I think it's a good person to introduce it. We need search function. We need technology firms to be here. We need designs, which is new, to reach new user groups. Many of you say we want data to go for policy, to change it. This is not what I hear from the heads of state and the ministers. They said, yeah, I know that. But go convince my voters. Go convince the public. It's not about the decision makers. We are not living in Soviet Union any longer with central planning. We have to go and tell the public of what it is. And the public will then vote. And the bold politicians will get support from the public. It's very much about doing that. I think you are quite good at putting your data at disposal for decision makers. But they have harsh decisions to make. And if the public is not with them, they can't go forward. We need the interactivity, we need the storytelling. We can do a lot of nice new things, but that requires innovation. How do we foster innovation? We foster innovation the way you do, you put the data free. But if we get the unified format with the data. Now the microdata, that's for the researchers, that's for the specified and narrow focus on it. But the time series, we need to get time series uploaded in unified format every Friday afternoon with a watermark. And I have a very good example of something here, you know. Do I own this? The $20 bill? No, I don't own it. The bank owns it. But I have the right to use it. And what's even most clever, I have the right to transfer the right to use it to someone else. Yeah, USAID wanted me, but yeah. Data should be like this. We don't need central planning. Many people, you know, who talk about data, you know, they don't understand that the force of data is if many can use it in unified format. Isn't this beautiful? Let me give you another allegory. Nocturne in B minor by Chopin. Anyone here that can see that it's beautiful? There used to be some who played the piano, no? Yeah, there's one here who can grasp that. There's one who can see it. Rest of us, we don't know what this is. But it's written in unified format, isn't it? So if you have the right instrument and you have a player, you can play it, and then everyone can hear it. In data, we have data producers that sit and build their own pianos and then try to play them. Let the composers be the composers. Let the great technology firms and the small startup compete of delivering the instruments. I've heard now that there are some new instruments here which are quite cheap, where kids can play in the home in a new way. And this is what we can construct with data. We can make it useful in the technology. And then we have players like me and many who can use the data in new ways. We have to have a division of labor. In many aspects, the statistical business is on medieval age still. It's a lot of hard work, and it's not appreciated how hard the work is. So we had a very bad mission statement in the beginning at Gapminder. We said we convert boring statistics to enjoyable graphics. It was stupid. Now we say we unveil the beauty of statistics, because the beauty is already there. The beauty lies in these notes already. The only thing you do with the instrument is that you enable a player to unveil the beauty which is in the composition. So So if we can compare different data, we get it in unified format, we get cheap instrument, and I was very happy after the acquisition of Google to get an email which I thought was spam first. It said bgates@microsoft.com. But actually Bill Gates invited me and asked, why didn't you sell this to me? Huh? And I said, we don't want it a product. Excel is great, but we don't want a product, we want a service. And Google accepted in their statement at the acquisition to make this freely available for public statistics. And they gracefully also gave Gapminder Foundation a free license and the right to sub-license the technology to anyone who provides free data. And they really were. But it's difficult. It's difficult to build this instrument. Google Earth and Maps function wonderful because geographical data, it's longitude and latitude and that's it. You can define every restaurant, every archaeological remain with longitude and latitude. Only if you are in the mountains in Afghanistan and look for people who live in caves, you have to have altitudes, you know. Because it's not enough if you stand on top of the cave. You have to know if someone lives down there also. And that's why statistic stratifies itself into infinity, actually. With sex, gender, education, employment, rural, urban, we can mention them, and we have an infinite number of certificates. So it is a challenge. And we are very happy that Google has taken on this, because this is how things are. Invention occur in Europe, development of technology take place in the United States. And also Microsoft is now competing, and they're publicly giving credit to us, both privately and publicly. And that's okay, that's nice. We must avoid this disease. This disease is DBHD. And it's nice to come to DHS because you are free of this disease. A database hugging disorder. I thought it was congenital from the beginning, but after getting to know great statistician, I know that it's acquired. It's because haphazard way of getting budgets. Haphazard way of getting budgets. And a sort of Mark Twain-induced stupid attitude to statisticians and data people, which we have to fight continuously. So we have to grade. There are some professions which you don't tell at dinner parties, you know. Statisticians often don't say, I'm an analyst. They say, I'm a government employee. My wife also has such, she's a child psychiatrist. She never tells it at dinner party. Undertakers is another one. You know, Can we increase, you know, the use of statistics to something which is appreciated? But that is more than getting it for policy, it's getting it broadly out. We are very happy at Gapminder that our main target group is schools today. It's children who go and tell the teacher, why don't we use this tool? Can't we use this in our group work? And it's very nice. So what about the next 25 years? Because 25 years is not mature in adults, it's just starting to become useful. And we want the normal life expectancy of this organization. Because if we look at the development of the world, we are not set with the world population until 2050. So please have a strategy group that goes far also. Because one thing, DHS functions in isolation from census and demographic surveillance sites. I was very happy to hear about that initiative in Peru, where you try to do a 3-month DHS, which moves. It's actually what we concluded of evaluating support to the demographic surveillance sites in Tanzania. They are pretty limited use. If you want to see impact of investments, the demographic surveillance site, well, the one produced a result on the mosquito net was useful, and some of them with the research. And how can the census be used in a better way together with this, to coordinate it like this? And this is a very big challenge from the funding organization. This cannot be done within the company or the professionals. It has to be thought about at a higher level. So we want this to be true and to happen in the next 25 years. Also, what we have seen, going from demo to health, demographics to health, disease with the HIV testing. It's absolutely dramatic. Almost 10 million people were relieved from HIV by DHS. We thought it was 40 million. Yeah, now it's important. We saw that HIV has more or less leveled off, still increasing in some countries and places, decreasing in others. But you really brought it, and you brought it to a stand where UNAIDS now dare to liberate their data. And I was quite amazed that it worked. I thought it was risky when we were going to collect blood. And that is the quality assurance of DHS, that people at at that width what the survey is, except to give blood. That means that the interaction is extremely good. Otherwise, you would have riots and you would have a problem. All of us who have, in difficult, remote parts of rural Africa, with My African, try to collect bloods, know that this is, if you do, you have to live in the village, you really have to gain the confidence of the people. So that's a very, very good. And that has the environment, water, sanitation, you know, all this talk about climate. The worst environmental problem today is that 2 million children die in diarrhea, and that billions of people drink their neighbors' lukewarm feces. I mean, I would rather have some DDT drug. You know, I would rather have more sunshine than to drink my neighbor's lukewarm feces. And how can we get this water and sanitation data? Is very, very weak. We were discussing that at Google Org. Could that be on mapping? How could that be done? To add things like this into the data. And if you add too much, the quality will fall. So it's a real difficult choice, real difficult choice. But I think with your partners and professionals in the countries, you are at the position to move forwards on this. And poverty monitoring. Poverty is in remote parts of the world, in the remote parts of the poorest countries. And you don't catch the small areas with DHS. It's too costly to do it in the small areas. And when we see poverty maps generated, we see that poverties are within districts in countries like Uganda, like Congo and Tanzania. And that is not solved. So this is a good young adult, which did well in college and just graduated. Now, you know, a professional start to be useful at the age of 25. Now they can take on the real task, that is to eradicate unnecessary disease and poverty in the world. And I wish you all the best for doing that, and good luck. Thank you very much.
So Professor Rosling is kind enough to take some questions. I'll tell you all that we've been webcasting this event live, and the video will be archived on the website. So what that means for you here in the room is that we ask that you use a microphone, tell us who you are before you state your question. So please, who would like to kick us off? Well, see, I've been here a long time. I've been here 11 years, lots of presentations. Never are they this smart and entertaining as well. So you've stunned them into silence. Right in the middle there.
I'd like to ask, I suppose you touched on the fact some of these harmonization issues have to be handled organizationally, but for those of us who are in contact with that process, what should we do, and I work on environmental data at the moment, do in order to make our data more publicly accessible, and when we're in a position to encourage organizations to do so, what avenues we should pursue? My name is Benjamin Vielgash. I'm with the International Food Policy Research Institute.
Well, I've come to the conclusion that we need a better technology. Why do we upload PDF files? Because everyone has the Acrobat reader. We need a pull factor. I put a very simple milestone for myself. You know Larry King Live? He has very boring bubbles. You've seen those gray, reddish bubbles. They've been the same for many years. It's just for branding. When he used animated graphics, which moves there, then we've succeeded. You know, it doesn't matter whether it's Gapminder or Google or anything, but we can have much more in the media of understandable graphics. Animation is only used for branding so far, and it's sort of costly. We have to cut it to that. So what organizations can do is to give a nice and good license for their data and to put it up in as unified format as they can see. And then it must be a process of technology being adapted to that. And which one which will take off, we don't know. I think the pull factor will decide. That doesn't come easy for a Swedish public health professor. It's quite close to central planning, so it has been a long journey for me proposing this. But I really can see that, yes, many people don't know what they do when they search on Yahoo and Google. They think they search the internet. Not at all. You search the copy of the internet that lies on the enormous servers of Yahoo and Google. Every day they copy the entire internet. They go into your web page, they open the web page, they go through every page, they open every PDF, every Word, every Excel you have there, and they copy it and they put it on their place. And then they rank it. And only when you click on that list is when you finally get it. So what Google has managed in this now is to get the first example of how public data would do. And the first example now which is available is unemployment rate, California. If I now type in unemployment rate, you get a one box. This is a one box system. Something is new there. And then it says immediately, source US Bureau of Labor Statistics. Don't take credits from the ones who did the hard job. And you click there and you have a graphics within a second. And you can see every year how California were. You can compare it to all US, and you can go in and you can open California, and you can take the county, and you have Alpine County here. What's that? Oh, that's a ski resort, you see. In June, there's 29% unemployed, and then it falls to... You see, it's funny with statistics. This is a... And then all the time, data source, US Bureau of Statistics, you click there, and you are there immediately. This is a way where you can add value of it, and you can get it in unified format. So if now Yahoo, if MSN, if a special vertical search will appear, we will see there will be a unified format. How that will take place, we don't know. And I think America is a very suitable place for having that great interaction between government and Google. We were actually had the idea of doing it at international level, but it's not possible because the World Bank is not like United States. It's more like Soviet Union when it comes to data. No, this is sad. This is really sad. We spent 7-8 years. You are not allowed to use the data. United States has a very clear policy for that. And we just discussed that with DHS today. You have PDFs up with your reports, and they are free to download. What does that mean, free to download? That I can take it on my computer? Can I put it up on my web page where I have an assignment for the students? Or can I print it out for my class in master, which I have? Or can I put it into a book? You should have a Creative Commons license. Creative Commons is a great innovation in digital media, that you say you are allowed to download this, you can change it, you can take a part of it, but you say that the source was DHS and you give the link back. The way government operates, the way business operates, the way the legal system operates in USA, you can advance on this, and it would be very nice to have it. But remember, only DHS data is not available. It's the environmental data, it's to make it comparable. And then people will compare data in a new way and come up with interesting things. Many say, those who suffer from severe DBHD, database hugging disorder, they said, no, we can't give the data to the people because they will make wrong comparisons and they will make wrong conclusions. And I say, yes, we call it freedom. You know? And this was exactly the same argument when someone came into that monastery in southern Germany and said, now we can print the Bible so everyone can have their own copy. Oh, no, they will misinterpret it. The church will be split. And so it was split. And some people were not allowed. And my ancestors was one of the reasons of going to Minnesota was not only lack of food, it was that they were not allowed to read the Bible the way they saw best. You know? So it's actually about freedom. And people have to misuse, and then we have to take that discussion. That's much better. And I think many of us will. The most important is to give credit back to the one doing the hard job and the professional job and secure their budget. Otherwise, it will ruin the system. You know? And that's very important. I can say one interesting thing which you can show if you go here. Look, here I've uploaded undefined mortality rate from Seattle, from Chris Murray. By the way, you got a nice comment from Chris Murray. That's something. That's very, very rare. Almost a full sentence, you know, without criticism, you know. And then it's from CME. This is United Nations. Now they are fighting each other. I'm one of the few who have friendly relations on both sides. And they use DHS data, and yet they come out with so different undefined mortality rates in the different countries. And how can that be? Because between my bubbles and your data exists these two. And if you go to United Nations, this is the Egypt data, and these are the result of each of the survey. DHS survey 1988 data. So you see this average line here, the red one, is a composition of many different surveys. And if I go to Chris Murray for the same, he presented like this. So you see, this is where there are many levels, you know. And now they try to force upon us, but nicely now our foundation has a bank account as business model. So it makes us very free. And we can choose, and we have decided now to put as our main indicator the United Nations, because they actually have a better documentation than Chris Murray. He has not advanced the last 2 years. Will he improve? We will switch over, and then we put both for advanced users. So it's a long journey. Make your data upwards and let others use your data and see that you get the credibility. And let's see that funders will understand this. And I really think that United States can do this. Yeah, no, I shouldn't go into too much politics, but let's just say that people have started to listen to the United States in the international agenda. You are in a very good position to move on this. When my son went here, you know, he said he went to work for Google. Now we say he lives in America. So it's like it's a very inspiring, and if you move forward on this, but it won't happen overnight. It won't happen by pushing the data, I think. It must be voluntarily.
Thank you. Veerle Cognier from USAID. You can't argue with, information should be free, and you can see if more people can use it and understand it, all the advantages that come with it. But I'd be interested in seeing whether you have any reflections then on, if there goes so much effort goes in gathering the data and analyzing it, etc., and if it's then given out for free, how do you see in the future, if information becomes more and more free, how the funding stream should work? Is it then more and more public sector funding of the research and then the future use of these data? I'd be interested in hearing your views on that.
I once walked down Wall Street on southern Manhattan to go and see New York Stock Exchange. And I walked on a tax-funded sidewalk all the way up to the entrance to New York Stock Exchange. The tax-funded sidewalks is the crucial construction for maintaining urban areas work so well. And no one is doubting that. Some things are just better run by governments. And I think there are few countries that underestimate the skill and capacity of their government as United States. It's sort of a culture to spit on the government in this country. Though it's quite good in many ways. I mean, California was a mess 1850. And why was it successful? It was not due to entrepreneurs. It was due to the government that kept control of the line titles and got the lynching stopped and got everything into order in the end. So we have to support that for government. And I think the outsourcing of that shouldn't be too much. That should be kept. I think the present president said it's not about how much government and how much private sector. It's about how good each of them deliver. And if you are a public data producers and people use that data to make their living, it's like handing out free heroin, if you excuse. They'll come back. And when you come to your 25-year birthday, they will stand on stage and they will praise you. Because they know bloody well that without you they wouldn't live. And I think that's it. But it's just to make that work means that those organizations, and we need a sort of sectorial collaboration on the data usage side in civil society and in corporate sector, so that we gives credit back and makes understanding of that. But I think it was an argument also in cities in New York whether they should have tax-funded sidewalks or not, but eventually they were there, and that will continue to exist. What is most interesting is that money is already spent. We do not ask for more money. It's not about more tax money. In fact, when I had the first discussion with Larry Page at Google, he asked me, I said, you must invest in making public statistics available because the taxpayers already invest $10 billion a year for that data. How much is it? He said. How much it costs? No. How many bytes is it? He said. Well, leaving the microdata away, just the public data, I said, it's not so much. Yes, but I want to know how much. I don't know. I said, well, then I can't discuss with you. He said, come back when you know it. So I rushed and I phoned Statistics Sweden. I got a response in 5 minutes. I tapped his shoulder and said, please, I know now. I said, it's about 10 terabyte. 10 terabyte, he said. Not more. That's less than the Lord of the Rings, he said. So this means when you have a technological guru which put that question. First he understood that I didn't write the code, though, and then he wanted to know how much it is. Public state data is no volume problem to handle at all. It's not volume. It's an organizational problem. How do we get that organization? When if pavement were like this on Wall Street, you had to different heights, it wouldn't work. You have to have a smooth pavement, you know, and you have to work. And at the side of that pavement, people should run their business. Restaurants, you know, and shops and civil society should operate there, you know, and culture and theater. But statistics should be the intellectual sidewalks of the society. And people should be able to build businesses and operate on side of that. And this will happen. It's not a doubt. This will happen, but it may take 15 years. It may take 2 years. We don't know.
Thank you very much. My name is Susie Peel, and I've been your biggest fan for years. I would like to request that you add the variable of literacy in comparison with health and wealth and all of those elements. You've done it already. I'm delighted. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we have in Gapminder World here, we have about 500 indicators which you can use. This is our website, Gapminder World. But we don't, the audience are two types. It's a lean forward audience, you know. People like you, they lean forward, oh, I want to have Gini, what is this, education? This, I want education, I want to have this. Is what. That's a small audience. The big audience, they lean backwards, they take a cafe latte, and they will click once on the play button. And that's it. So what we want is we want to put the tool in the hands of many to produce these videos and other materials, you know. That's when things will take off. I did one little video on swine flu alert, which is #1 on swine flu alert on YouTube now, and it sort of calmed things down. We created an indicator called news by death ratio. And swine flu had 8,000 news reports on Google News during 13 days per death, and tuberculosis had 0.1 during the same period of time. And it was just took, so you can do that. And you can show also projections. Here I have GDP per capita, and here I under 5 mortality. And then people talk about the crisis. This is IMF's data, which we, without license, have uploaded to show you. And I hope I look forward to IMF and World Bank taking me to court. Because the president of the Nobel Foundation in Stockholm will sit at my side, and I have my speech prepared. Yeah. So you want to see the crisis now? Can you see the crisis? Here it's coming. Didn't you see it? Oh, it's a big crisis here. Keep your eye on this little bubble here. We take it back, and we show the rest of the world also. And here we go, here we go, here we go. Here's Lehman Brothers. You don't see it. I have to put trails. It's a big crisis. Now you saw it. No? No, here, there it was. We have a tool here, which is a crisis microscope. You can. This is the crisis, you see? It goes from $43,000 to 41. This is the crisis. Yeah. You have very many interesting words in the American language. I think bullshit is one of the most interesting. This is the crisis. We lose 9 million children a year. 6 million of them absolutely unnecessary. This is the crisis. The other is, it's a financial turmoil made in USA, and actions are taken against it, you know. And it's interesting to see, you know, you get magnitudes of things here. You will also note that China has no crisis, you know. They just move on. If you apply the microscope on China here, you know. We can go backwards here. It's a little slower here, you see. A little, but they don't move on. So the gap there will close faster during these 5 years than during the former years. So we can make all the data available. This is a technology where we cannot click down. We have another one which is called gaps within. If you are open here, we have. I advise you to go and look at gaps within China, India, European Union, and US, and you can look at the child mortality of this city, and see how many countries in Latin America that has lower child mortality than Washington D.C. today. We are constructing an Obama meter, where we will measure the child mortality in Washington D.C. on a monthly basis, compared to the African immigrants in Sweden. And they have much lower. Actually, they have lower child mortality than the whites in Washington, D.C. So a health system can be constructed different. And there's a lot of data which you can put forwards on this. And we should get all the statistics out. Create a pull factor. Let many make YouTube videos.
I wanted to ask one in terms of, you've mentioned the bank a couple times in the UN. Are there other institutions, either public or private, that you would want to flag for us as folks who could do more or do things differently in the directions you've spoken about?
My mentor is Paul Chung at the United Nations Statistic Division. That's a sort of boring part of the UN organization, but it's a steady one. They have been working since 1948 together with the statistical agency, and it's not so appreciated. You know, they don't make a lot of fuss about MDG, but they try to steadily do it. And Paul Chung, coming from Singapore, had been the head of statistics in Singapore, formerly professor in Singapore, originating from China. He saw the vision about how to handle data. And I think in the long term, it's those sort of institutions that are important. You know, it's the ones who see that producing data, handling data, keeping the data in order, it's a boring task which has enormous intellectual challenging professional to make it comparable over time. You know, and you are under political pressure. So it's those want to work for a long time. Whereas the World Bank, you know, they are very great professionals, but their policy and their credibility is problematic. OECD also have very great people working with it, and they do some good things with education in the PISA study and other things, you know, but then they sell their data, you know, and you don't allow, and even you buy the data and you're not allowed to redistribute it. And this is stopping innovation. So I think, and it's the National Statistical Agency, it's the national institution. That's what Paul Chung learned me. Yeah, all these international things, you know. After all, it is the National Statistical Agency, it's the professional staff of the nations. That's why your major impact for the future perhaps may be the training of good survey methodology and honest, transparent quality assurance. That will be the main impact of DHS for the future. Yeah? So help getting that into the National Institute and less of this data massage. No massage institute. The whole MDG is one big massage institute, you know. You know, a minister of international aid in Sweden came to me, oh, I want maternal mortality, she said. Can you produce it? No, we only have 10 and 10 years estimates. It's very big. No, I want it. Can't you make, I would like a curve which shows, like, can't you make the bubbles move, you know? And I said, I wear a big brand. No number, no bubble, we say. So I think that the national institutions, you know, government, really, and skilled professional people who see as their patriotic task to work in their nations and develop this and work in their region, they are the ones you should support. And do it, you know, find a way, you know, to keep steady. Sometimes it can be surprising. You think you get a new nice administration, and that's in economic problem, and they cut statistics, they may say, you know. You may get signals suddenly, which you have to resist in an organization like USAID, and keep this on. It's difficult to give you the right international prize, because it's this US government and a private company. How can we get the peace prize to you? It will be very difficult, you know. So but we would try to get the recognition to this, and I think it would come through the countries. It's very important that the countries come up as they spoke in this video, and that they would recognize this, and that you become the postgraduate training institution for young statisticians in low-income countries. That's very important.
Hi, my name is Linda Cahalan, and I am technical advisor with USAID and Office of Population Reproductive Health. Trying to think how to ask this question without sounding flip, but I think it's wonderful the software that brings this all to life, and the discussion about the availability of data and how important that is, and new statisticians coming along being able to use the data. But I recognize too that part of what you have and what you bring to it is the engaging factor. And I'm wondering when you're going to put together the Hans Rosling School of Entertaining Engagement, in how to bring these statistics to life to the public. This is part of it, I think, the data, the software for the data, the moving bubbles. But part of it too is being able, as a professional, as a statistician, or as a medical provider, or whoever brings this to the public eye, to be able to do it in a way that really makes it live. And so I'm wondering, what can you or we do about that?
The professional organization we already have, it's SSAI, Sword Swallowers Association International. I strongly recommend, we have a website there, and there's official membership. Before you get this, you know, you have to have 40 centimeters down the sword. So, no, but that's part of the pull factor. It's part of the pull factor. You know, there's some things I'm doing, you know. First, I don't use this so that I can move. Then I turn my back to the audience, and then I use my hand instead of a laser pointer. This is very simple. Start doing that. And then don't place this so person can't see it. You could never run a cinema if part of the audience can't see the whole audience. So it's a liturgic, the church-like, and I shouldn't say church-like because there are so lively churches today, you know. So it would be unjust, you know. We become very formal in the way we present things, and that you can change. But it's also being done in small groups. We run at the Global Health Council here. We run the Las Vegas version of Gapminder. We've gone one step forward. And we project the bubbles down to a game board where you can bet where Egypt is today in life expectancy and fertility rate. And we have chips there. We have gone as vulgar as we dare to go, you know. We even had problem at immigration why we came from Sweden with such a lot of casino chips in them. So we are exploring different ways of doing it, and that will, if it's successful, it will take off. And this may not be. There's a lot of things you are allowed to do if you are a 60-year-old, blonde, tall, Swedish medical doctor. I advise everyone to be that. Because life is much more easy, you know, than if you are an American black short lady, you know. It's much more difficult. So this is part of it. But it's many. We want to scale it. We would like to make tools in the hands of many. And that's what can happen. I think also that the internet can be much more serious. Time magazine ran an article a month ago. I featured together with some professor from the United States that the big universities now put their good lectures on the internet instead of hiding them behind passwords, you know. So internet is still day one. And we have this scream from the news media. It's really a challenge to do. That's great journalists. We tried to do, we were invited to The Economist. They say produce a weekly trend. We couldn't do it. They're so fast. Journalists are so good at what they are doing. They are really professionals also. You always come to admire a group of professionals when you work closely with them. I worked half a year with Google.org philanthropy, giving away money, and now I will never complain of an aid organization of the administration any longer. It's so challenging to give away money and to supervise and decide who shall get and who shall not get and how you manage. Everything is challenging. So the journalists have to adapt and the activists have to adapt. But it's a big problem in global health issues and global development is that it's so ideology-based and so value-based. So we don't look at facts. We don't have that tradition. And this we have to get around. And MDG is a massage institute. We put together things. There's no more extra investment in primary data collection within the MDG process. It's just massaging what we have. And like Jens Stoltenberg, the Norwegian Prime Minister, who is an economist himself, he went through it very seriously. In the end, he said, it's only child mortality we can use because of DHS. There's no other of these indicators that we water, environment. We haven't the slightest chance to see if a country progressed from one decade to the other. Not maternal mortality, malaria. It's very difficult to do. So stick measuring what we have, make that available for people, and many see that you can do it. So within a year, perhaps there will be a slightly shorter and younger Swedish professor that dare to do what I do, and then you will find someone from Congo doing it with music, and then you will find an Indian who do it much more metaphysically, and in the end the Chinese will beat us all, you know. So.
Dr. Rosling, for your great presentation of data. I've seen it many times on YouTube. My name is Jed Molina. I'm with USAID. And one of my many personality flaws is that I have an engineering degree. And so when I look at data, my mind always starts to think about error analysis, because when you design engineering things, be it a chemical distillation plant or a bridge, you got to worry about when you start combining numbers that your error isn't greater than the value of the number you're looking at. And obviously DHS is very cautious about that. But I noticed you're combining lots of different forms of data, and particularly in the years going way back. How do you manage error analysis, and does the motion of your bubbles dissolve when you do that? And then my other just a point to make is that you might change your sidewalk analogy to street, because in fact another engineering thing I've learned is that most of the time the streets are built by the group that built the building next to it. The government maintains them, but they don't usually build the sidewalks. They do build the streets, however. Anyway, back to the error analysis.
We have chosen to have here at the axis documentation from where they come and view the data. And then we invite criticism. And what we found out was that there was no 200-year time series data, so we compiled it. And here you are, 200 years backwards in time. Income per person and life expectancy. And we had to go to different faculty. In humanity, we found historians who systematically have reviewed historical documents when the demographic transition took place. And they had in semi-quantitative terms presented it. They never met those in faculty of social science in demography, who disregarded them. You know? And then we met those in statistics in another part of the university who didn't like demographers. And the epidemiologists didn't like none of them, you know, because they didn't have a medical degree. So it's sort of, and we then identify ourselves as a museum. Yeah? We don't produce the data. We don't have an advocacy message. We want to display the dinosaur skeleton. And if the hind legs are missing, we make them in plastics. But we don't hide that they are made in plastic, and we describe why they are made in plastics. And the difference in the world is so big. This is 1800, United Kingdom, richest in the world, and together with the Netherlands, and they have 40 years life expectancy, you know. United States here, and this is what happened. It's quite nice. 200 years of world history in 10 seconds. And the flat world of Thomas Friedman. And the interesting thing is you go back here and you say, well, after all, it's just about two countries, whether we will have peace or war in the future, you know. And it's about these two. How will they do? And during foreign dominance, China went backwards. That's what people are agreed with. And then China started to advance. And then we had the Great Leap Forward. And the estimate of the fall in life expectancy during the Great Leap Forwards I made. I tried to get the best demographer in Harvard to do it, but they wouldn't do it. I tried to get my Chinese scholars to do it. They didn't dare to do it yet. You know? So I did it. And I did it using death rate estimations, crude death rates estimations. And then I compared to countries having, in a very crude way, plastic hind legs. Because we wouldn't be correct to display China as UN do without the catastrophe of the big leap forward. So these are plastic legs, but it gives a completely new ideas about China, what is happening. You see China really catching up here. What has happened? It happened in the last year. And also it's very important to see that all the formerly colonially dominated countries in different ways, they take off after independence. Independence is a very good thing. You rule yourself. And United States is one of the best examples of that. And here you have this continuous world today. There is a risk with what you have, but the big change over time you can do it. When you would go in and estimate what Uganda have done in child health over the last 3 years, then you have to be much more careful. Much more careful, you know. And we also put in, so when you go backwards here, you should have, here. There's a caveat, highly uncertain data before 1900. We are going to develop this even more, you know. So we mark this, and we have no special interest of doing it. My most classical one, which I've done, is this one. I take here life expectancy on that one. That's what we have. And then I take here children per woman on this one. And this is 1950. And this is the developing world, and this is the industrialized world. And this is what happens, you know. It's a tremendous change. And that's not known. It's not known. If you look at Vietnam, and the uncertainty of the data get drowned in the big change. Vietnam 1962, United States 1962, and this is what happened. I mean, how many in this country are aware that Vietnam today have the same life expectancy, the same size of family as United States had when Senator McCain came back from that terrible years of prison in Hanoi? At least not Al Gore. He jumped the stage and admitted it, whispering into my ear, I didn't know it. I didn't have the slightest idea. And he had gracefully allowed me to communicate that to the world. Because I used to add, then you can imagine the other politicians, you know. If Al Gore, who reads statistics, his wife has testified that he reads statistics at night, you know. And we missed this. We still have a concept. I like Fareed Zacharias in Newsweek. I think is a very enlightened reader. I have a great pleasure of reading it. And he explains very much about this big change which is taking place. Now, if we look at Vietnam, you can do a very interesting thing here. If you look at Vietnam and US here, and you see how similar they are, and they are catched up in the human dimension, and whether you should give aid or not to Vietnam can really be discussed. At least you should not have trade barriers for their great product. Europe made trade barriers on the shoes they have and other products. It's better to take away the trade barriers and take away the aid, according to and focus the aid on the real poorest. But if I change this one to money now, you see how nice, this is the lean forward community, income per person here. Then suddenly you see that Vietnam is not at all catching up with the United States. Saint Vincent and Grenadines, there's some problem. I have to do the following here. See, Vietnam is not at all catched up with money. And that is the uncertainty of the data is very wide. But the fact that Vietnam is 4 generations after US in economy per person, whereas only 1 generation after in health, that's a fact. And to get that into the head of the people of the world. Even Naomi Klein thinks that people in China are sitting and making simple shoes, you know, at low salary. They are good engineers in chemistry and physics, and they make the new base station for Ericsson. And we thought that Cisco would be the competitor for Ericsson, but it's no longer. They are laughing at Cisco. It's Huawei, the Chinese company, who moved to Sweden and they bought the house across Ericsson. So every engineer that is fired just walk across the road and work for the Chinese. And we are not bugging, you know, that the Chinese will buy Volvo and Saab. That's the future of and then we will get electric motors into the cars. You know? So, I mean, and this is the mindset. People have a mindset that doesn't correspond to the data set. And for that task, the uncertainty range is not so much a problem. Whereas when it comes for evaluating program, I would be the first to agree with you that we don't appreciate the uncertainty in many of the measurements. We have to look for a longer term.
Hi, John Sauer, Water Advocates. You talked about the weakness of water and sanitation data. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that and maybe how that could be improved.
The short answer is no, because I've come to appreciate how little I understand about the challenges. But basically it is not on household level. It's often on community level you want the data. So household surveys become inefficient, and a two-stage cluster sample does not, you lose. It's no idea asking 10 or 20 households in one village if they have good water when everyone has the same terrible. So the sample size is defined by the number of clusters rather than the number. Yeah, you are nodding here, and DHS. And that's a problem for the DHS methodology. It doesn't catch things that change, that varies between communities. Access to road, for instance, DHS is useless because it's a cluster. You have to design it differently. And we would probably need a mapping device. One thing I would like is to have the entire world population in administrative units available on mapping tools, Google Earth, Google Map, and competitors. I mean, that what I've liked with Google is that they see the only future is that there's a free access to data, and then they are one of several competitors. The other doesn't have a future. It won't work. And then you would generate the number of expected births, and on that you can then place the access to delivery service. And we could see on a map. I think we need to have what is community service is best on geographical maps to set. What is rates, which is determined on individual levels, the bubbles are nicer. When you have big inequities in health and wealth within communities, you can transform them to bubbles. But for map you can display it. Now when you use maps like here, you also have to think, don't color countries with a color. When I transformed this to map, I lost the x-axis, I lost the y-axis. Both I lost just to show where Brazil is. And I shouldn't color Brazil, I make an icon which the size is the population of Brazil. So using map as a basis for statistic is not really good for analytical purpose. And the good thing when I go back to our chart here is, whereas you would need actions for water will be geographical. You wouldn't solve one household's water problem at a time. You will solve several, as you would do with electricity, which is another thing which we have sort of weak data unnecessarily about. But that's before no aid organization dare to put electricity high on the priority agenda. I don't know with USAID, but Sweden doesn't dare put it because green frogs are higher on the priority than children in the rich countries today. And you can't build dams. It's a very strange things we have. But water is quite good understanding that people should have safe water. But we are really bad at doing it. Probably it needs geographical surveys. And could we have a tool? I know that Frank Riesberman at Google.org was working on that. Could we have a mapping tool where we, instead of a national level survey, we could have small-scale community putting up their information in a comparable format so that many data providers would then make a good map of the country. Otherwise, it becomes very costly to make a complete survey. Or you could focus on the peri-urban areas where 3 billion people will appear in the coming 2 generations. There's no population growth in the rural areas any longer. They will all growth will be in cities. And there you could have mapping device. The planning of cities need mapping device. So now I'm at a loss. I'm at a loss with water. And I think this shows that's a problem with MDG is good in many ways. I like it because it shows many dimensions of development. It's not this one thing. That's a good thing with them. And that is measurable and it's based on data. But you need to measure the different dimensions in different ways. And perhaps national average for water is not so useful. It's a better mapping a country with red catastrophe areas, with sort of yellow semi-problematic and blue, which are quite nice then. I think a mapping tool would be better. But then also you would have in some areas where you have to pay for the water, you will see that there's good water in the community, but the poor cannot access it. I talk too long in relation to what I know.
Thank you very much. My name is Elizabeth McGregor-Skinner from Apt Associates, and you mentioned before that you felt it was very important for data to speak about poverty reduction. And I was wondering if you could highlight for us a little bit about what some of these tools can do in terms of health and poverty, particularly in countries where there are significant income inequities. Thank you.
Well, the tool we did for that, which was quite successful, was to try to show income distribution graphically. Income distribution is so heavily politicized. If you are neoliberal, you say, oh, the world is growing, everything is okay. And if you are anti-globalization, you say, no, the gap is widening between the rich and the poor. And sometimes if I would go commercial, I would run a consultancy firm for inequity measurements. And I would sell for the neoliberals, I would make log transformations so they would be satisfied. And for the leftish group, I could sell other forms of measurement. You can always transform it in some way. So what we did was we showed it in a graphical way instead. Slideshow mode. This we did with UNDP, show buttons. And it resulted that Claes Johansson stopped working for UNDP and is the head of data at Gapminder Foundation. He did Human Development Index for many years. So this is the income distribution of the world, and it's this is Yuri Dikhanov from World Bank. Once more, excellent professional work at the World Bank. My criticism is for policy. It's not persons or professionalism. That's really good. Yeah? So he made this based on household surveys. And then we could show that Africa is there. This is the African income distribution. And this is the OECD income distribution. And that is the Latin American income distribution. And that is the East Europe income distribution. And that's the Asia. Designing that so it falls down, this flips. That is the 21st iteration. So this is sort of, and that's this. And then you can go back to 1970 when I was a public health student in Bangalore. Then poverty was here in China and India, you know, mainly. And then this happens, and you can see now the income that hundreds of millions, billions of people passed the poverty line, but they just passed one little step there, and here they are standing like this, you know. Just take one catastrophic health event, a cesarean section, and they are back in poverty. So when I started my career, I said that poverty caused disease, and now I say disease caused poverty. And we would need another way, because many in the rich part of the world, they think that people in Africa, they are poor and they sit hungry and they ask for aid. They work like hell. They work very hard. And they try to get out of this, but the context is not conducive for good progress, so they fall back all the time. Not all the time, but many of them fall back. And the passage over this line is very, very frequent. Very few. The migration here is quite limited regarding the moving here. And we are talking about remittances now, but then still the World Bank used the development country concept. I would like to see the remittance from Botswana and South Africa to Mozambique and Zambia. I would like to see remittance from Thailand to Burma. We would need to see remittance within countries, from Kinshasa to Bandundu region. There's a lot of remittance. The volume of remittance is much bigger between middle-income countries and to low-income countries, and between urban areas to rural areas. So that's, and this is a way then of showing, which was quite positive. And then we can look the projection, but the projection here, you know, problem. Projection has to stop at the door of Lehman Brothers here in 2008, you know, because this didn't happen, you know. We got a slightly backwards term like this. But that will probably, China and Asia will push forward here, and OECD will come to a little stand. And the post-colonial hump will disappear. But the world is, of course, this is logarithmic axis, so it's very skewed distribution we have, with lots of people with just some few dollars. This is hunger, this is welfare. Most of the world population live between hunger and welfare. And then we are ideological, and if you're a Swede, they say, we should have publicly tax-funded health service, that's much better, you know. And in the United States, no, we can have philanthropy, we can have McDonald's health service, and we think it's disgusting, and vice versa. So, and the only thing we know that if there's not more money than this, there's no way. You go public or you go McDonald's, it's just not enough to give a decent health service. And I think one of the main challenges we are going, if we talk about global health, really not like aid for the low-income countries, how do we finance cancer treatment in the middle-income countries? And interesting in Pfizer, I just lectured to Pfizer, they are now starting emerging market pricing. So even on original products, they price them much lower in emerging markets than they do elsewhere. And I think the distinction between emerging markets and low-income countries will become very, very important. And then also to describe then the inequity within countries. Because if you look at data like this here, this is child survival. Yeah? We have flipped child mortality. This is GDP per capita, and those are the countries. And the really interesting is when we use your wealth quintile and we split Namibia. There's Namibia. Upper quintile is there, lower quintile is there. This is Brazil. Huh? This is Vietnam. And this is Uganda. And this is the great cotton producer, Niger, that has to fight against $5 billion to 25,000 cotton growers in this country. Yeah? And that's about almost half of the whole health aid in the world to 25,000 cotton growers. It's $200,000 per family or per production unit. And that's why you see, it's no bad governance in Nigeria, actually. This is not the reason. So this splitting has been very powerful to show that the countries, when the average of a country moves, it takes 50 years from the lower quintile to the upper. Now, some of you in data would say, oh, my critics went away, I was lucky now. Eh? Because how could you put wealth quintile on GDP per capita? Wait. This is DHS data on asset quintiles. You know the asset quintiles. How can you put that on GDP per capita? This is the first time you see that. Because if you take an academic person, they can't do it because no one else have done it. No one have gained a PhD on it. And we were discussing this until my son got furious one night, and he's a dropout of all sorts of education, the one who made the software. So he just made a King Fu calculation one night where he used the Gini index and took the different parts of Gini index, and then he said, I assume that DHS wealth index measures income almost like the World Bank. With that assumption, he did this in one night. And now we are working with economists that after 2 years can't do it. So that's a little about the problem with the museum, if you're going to explain the existence, so we stop doing this because we can't make an academic career on it. Eh? And that's a little why I like DHS also, because the people who do a DHS survey, they don't get the master or something nice on it. That they do when they download the data set, but they deliver. Eh? But if you could go together with the World Bank and coordinate your surveys on economy of income together with DHS data, we could get this done. It's very forceful. And it really it also shows that Vietnam indeed has a load, because geographically Vietnam is quite homogeneous, and it's the same people, culture, and now they have merged the economy. So it's not so, like Brazil is geographically very, and culturally and ethnically very heterogeneous. So this is Rio Grande do Sul, and this is Amazonas, and this is like Eritrea, and this is like the United States, but not as healthy, because it's on even miserable health system. And also you have the transmission of the poverty diseases from the poorest with salmonella and diarrhea and so on. So it's very forceful to get this done. But we don't process the data. This is a problem. We need to process the data up to this level so it can be useful. And it's just vulgar, young, museum career, who dare to do it, And we haven't had one single criticism for this. So my son is just, I won't repeat what he is even more vulgar than I when he talk about academic people, His sister made a PhD, and he asked, how many have read your thesis? I have 25 downloads a day. So it's like, it is really challenging, because to get it useful, you have to do that rough estimates, to get over that. And that's probably not the task for DHS. That's a task for people to use. I don't advise you to do that. We have to have bold people in between who do it, to take your data, because otherwise you will lose your credibility. Too much talking.
No, but it is truly inspirational, and it's not every day that we have inspiration in this room. So We are greatly. I'm hoping my boss is left for the day, but it really isn't. I mean, to be fair, this is very powerful work, both the substance of the focus in child survival and the work that DHS has done to give us this data, but then more importantly, going the extra 9 yards to give us a tool where we can use it and make it not only entertaining and lively, which it is, but that really does it a disservice to talk about how strong a tool it is for making informed decisions and really addressing these crises, as you say.
And I see I have my colleague Rhonda here at the back, and Population Reference Bureau is actually the one taking off and trying to use data, not exactly in this way, but in a way together with countries that is relevant, and doing videos and experimenting. But it's not that easy. We have to experiment, we have to test, we have to iterate, and you can't have a straightforward plan. There would be need too many who would do it. And we have to remember to put credit. Here we just put credits to UNDP because they paid for this compilation, so you are not mentioned here, you know. But not one of these bubbles would have existed without DHS. Thank you very much. You are also a big inspiration.